Good evening. We begin tonight with some developing news out of Gaza. There are reports the Egyptian-controlled Rafah border crossing is set to reopen to allow for the movement of humanitarian aid into the enclave. This is the view of the crossing, and shortly we'll get an update on the situation from our correspondent in Israel. But taking a look at some of the other key developments today. The UN warns that fuel reserves at Gaza hospitals are likely to run out in 24 hours. Benjamin Netanyahu has chaired the first meeting of an emergency cabinet. The Israeli Prime Minister has also extended an invitation to US President Joe Biden to visit, according to reports. The Australian government says options for Australians wanting to leave Israel on assisted flights is running out. And a warning that our coverage will contain distressing images. Let's go to our chief international correspondent, Ben Lewis, who's joining us tonight from Ashdod in Israel. Good evening, Ben. What more do we know about the border crossing reopening?
Yeah, Janice, good evening. A fair bit of confusion about this at the moment. Egypt reporting that the Rafah crossing was going to be opened for a few hours to allow foreign passport holders to leave the Gaza Strip and to allow aid and desperately needed supplies to get in, and that would be accompanied by a brief ceasefire located only in the south of the Gaza Strip just for a few hours. Well, in the last few minutes we've heard from the Israeli Prime Minister's office. They say that there is no ceasefire and no plans for that crossing point to be reopened, and Hamas have said that they have no knowledge of this truce that's being discussed. Still, the United States has been warning its citizens in the Gaza Strip to head south to as close as possible to the crossing, warning that if it does open, it's going to happen at very short notice. Aid is desperately needed in the Gaza Strip at the moment. The humanitarian crisis there is growing worse by the day. A desperate and dangerous attempt to save lives. The aftermath of an Israeli airstrike at the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza's north. Residents digging with their bare hands in search of survivors. Fula al-Laham is just 4 years old. 14 of her family members, including her parents and siblings, were killed in a separate airstrike in the south. Fula's grandmother is all she has left. The Israeli airstrikes are retaliation for Hamas's unprecedented attack on Israel on October 7th, killing at least 1,300 people and taking scores hostage. Since then, more than 2,500 Gazans have been killed, a quarter of them children, according to local authorities. And they say nearly 10,000 people have been wounded, so hospitals look like this.
Our hands are tied. We expanded the hospital beds, the ICU beds many times. Now it's fully backed, so nothing to do.
Doctors were ordered to evacuate this hospital in the north, but they're refusing, with newborn babies in critical care.
الذي يقع في شمال قطاع غزة والقسم الوحيد الذي يقدم خدمة المواليد ولا في أي إنسانية في الدنيا تقول أنه ممكن فصل هؤلاء الأطفال من هذه الأجهزة ونقلها إلى مكان آخر.
Palestinian authorities estimate 1,000 people are missing under rubble, including this man's relatives. Israel says more than 600,000 Gazans have now relocated to the south of the Strip as instructed.
As I speak with you, Gaza is running out of water and electricity. In fact, Gaza is being strangled, and it seems that the world right now has lost its humanity.
Israel has agreed to a US request to turn the pipes back on in southern Gaza, but a lack of power means water pumps often don't function. After days of criticism from the families of abducted Israelis, Benjamin Netanyahu met with them. Some are calling for further military action against Hamas to be delayed until their loved ones are found. But that won't happen. At the first meeting of his emergency war cabinet, the Prime Minister made clear a ground campaign is inevitable and imminent. On US television, Joe Biden said taking out the extremists is a necessary requirement.
Do you believe that Hamas must be eliminated entirely?
Yes, I do.
Would you support Israeli occupation of Gaza at this point?
I think it'd be a big mistake. Hamas and the extreme elements of Hamas don't represent all the Palestinian people.
The IDF says it's on standby and waiting for the political decision to go in. From here we can see straight into the Gaza Strip. We've witnessed a few airstrikes this morning and you can get a sense of what there's another one, and you can get a sense of what Israeli soldiers will be walking into. There are collapsed buildings and really densely populated urban areas. And even after a week of non-stop Israeli airstrikes, Hamas militants are still firing rockets back at Israel. 6,600 since last Saturday. Border communities like Sderot are used to red alerts. Shimrit gave birth just 1 week ago. Her daughter was born prematurely and remains in a hospital in nearby Ashkelon. She checked herself out so she could get her 4 other daughters to safety.
לטובת הילדים, כי הם כבר נכנסו לחרדות והם בטראומות, אז החלטנו להתפנות לטובת הילדים.
Tensions continue to rise on Israel's northern border with Lebanon. There have been intense exchanges between IDF troops and Hezbollah, the headquarters of the UN peacekeeping force hit by rocket fire. Israel's defence minister says his country has no interest in a war in the north. Still, it's on alert.
מה שאתם רואים עכשיו בעזה זה דבר שאנחנו יודעים לשכפל אותו במקומות אחרים. אבל אין לנו עניין במלחמה בצפון. אנחנו לא רוצים להסלים את המצב. יש לנו משימה לטפל בה ואנחנו נטפל בה. אבל אם מישהו יעשה טעות, הוא יישא במחיר.
This could be a war fought on 2 fronts. And this morning, the Israeli government has announced it is evacuating 28 communities within 2 kilometres of the border with Lebanon because of the increase in there. Janice, there has been some discussion here that Benjamin Netanyahu has invited Joe Biden to come visit Israel in the coming days. The White House is said to be considering that offer, and that could influence the timing of a potential ground incursion into Gaza.
Thanks so much. That's our chief international correspondent, Ben Lewis, updating us from Ashdod in Israel.